Yeah, Cabo even brought it up, I wrote it down, but you're gonna say it? Okay, so, we appreciate all of your passion and everything, and it was refreshing to see how dedicated you are to equity, and I love all of y'all, you know that. But one of the things that we discussed here, and Cabo said, well, how do we train or enhance and educate our activists to dig for that money?
Well,
Get in the weeds. Anyone want to answer that, or?
All of you can if you want.
We were talking about the
Yep.
same thing, kind of cradle to today.
yeah.
So it starts early. I'll say the part that I shared that, my parents brought me into those rooms for those meetings that weren't fun. And so, but I knew it was meaningful and important. And so I bring my son, I've been bringing him to council meetings, to committee meetings, since he was probably, I don't know when, probably 3. And so he recognizes those places. He recognizes that this is what adults do. So I think that there's the importance of building an understanding that for our structure, these things happen, and this is where you need to build an understanding and awareness of that. They're not always fun, as we mentioned. So we talked a little more about, how do we help past that point. But I would say it's important to start young, exposing people to different methods of society.
We also talked about breaking the responsibility down. I mean, these are very large activities. I mean, and that's even for just, I don't want to say a simple thing, such as like even that was a very complex project with the Green Line. But you think about all the pieces that go to it. But you have to play team ball. I mean, that's basically what happens. And unfortunately, we haven't gotten into that really, even though you guys showed along Central and the Green Line, how when you come together and you really stick with it, you're able to get some true wins. We have to maintain that, and it's organizations like this, it's efforts that you guys are going through and that make it happen, but you have to multiply yourself. You have to find other friends to be able to help you out with simple little things and have them catch the bug somehow. And from there, we'll have a fighting chance. Because think about this, when we say it's a battle, that means there's two sides to the conversation. Understand that the other side's fighting to maintain the status quo. And that we have to do a better job of rallying up our army. That when you start to show that this is actually fighting for our lives and livelihoods and the possibility to be able to provide for our children and our communities and everything else, that might be able to get people going. And then you set the systems in place to get them to do the simple little things early, learning how to talk to your legislators, how to go through all the processes, and then we work from there. It's a lot to be done, but it's necessary to be done. So thanks. That's a great question, actually.
But I think to clarify just a little teeny bit, is that some of us know how to go to the legislature. We won't find that swimming pool money that he was talking about. Do you know what I'm saying? Just to clarify.
So how to find the money?
So somebody's already come up with a baseball analogy tonight, so I don't have to be the first one. I'm just saying that pitchers and catchers are reporting on the 22nd.
On the 22nd.
But what you're looking for is, that veteran player who knows where all that stuff is.
Yeah.
And they're out there. They're willing to help, and they can point you in the right direction.
Yeah.
Reading through a budget document is just really bad.
It's painful.
But if you chunk it out, if you break it up into bits and you look at it, then it becomes much more manageable. The other point that I would make is try and be really strategic. And so as an example, I do a lot of work with the Alliance for Metropolitan Stability, and I talk with Russ Adams a lot, and they've got the Hire campaign, and that's really cool. Go out and grab parts of as much of the construction contracts as possible. But and that in and of itself is good. But think about what it is that they're building. Why yeah, it's great to have the construction job, but if you're doing it in your neighborhood, repairing roads that are potholed, replacing bridges that are about to fall, rather than spending $600 million on a new bridge across the St. Croix, that kind of decision is important as well. That's and so that's it's the revenue and expenditure stuff, but it's really important to be strategic. And getting the jobs is great, but you want to be building on the right kind of projects.
Yeah.
So sometimes the money isn't always in the budget document either.
Right.
So you have to understand what makes up the financial landscape or ecology of what it is you're trying to work in. And so I was thinking about this a little bit to try to break out what are those places that I had to look to understand what was the opportunity in legacy funds. And it wasn't in the fund, it was actually in the plan for how the funds that were supposed to be spent. That was my tool, my leverage point. And so you look at what it is that you're looking to affect or get involved in, map out who are the people and the cultures that are involved in this, who have, that are the players. What's the mission or the work? What are other things that it's closely related to? Understand fully what is the mission, what is the work. It was by me fully understanding what was the mission that allowed me to say we need to change. The budget didn't change. How the budget was spent was clarified and then put into rules and practice. Understand the finances. Understand any laws that govern those dollars. There may be an opportunity there for a leverage point to pressure on something. What's the built environment around it? So really understanding that, and what's the natural environment around it that's a part of it. There may be opportunities of laws related to a natural environment that is a part of something you're concerned about that may be a leverage point for creating change. So it may be Theodore Park being next to the Bottineau line. That may mean that there needs to be investments made so that the north side residents aren't cut off from the natural environment nearby. And that's the leverage point for getting more crossings or better crossings over the Bottineau line when it goes into place, for example.
Right.
So there are all these different lenses you can apply to the work to understand where may that leverage point be, where may other dollars be brought in that aren't even a part of the budget to begin with, but there's an opportunity through an alignment in one of those other places.
The only thing that I would say, quick, Brett already said this, but I mean, I do think in any sort of an effort, you got to figure out who's on your team and then figure out who can play to what strengths. And the budget project is always, like, people are always, okay, can you do the numbers? That's what we do in almost any campaign is we nerd out on all the numbers. And people at this point we don't want to read it, just tell us what it is. Don't prove it, just tell us. And so we get to a level of trust where we're the only ones.
Yeah.
And we are happy to take technical assistance requests from anybody on state budget stuff. So we're happy to do that. And I don't mean you can't have the information yourself and look at it and own it, but I do think not everyone has to, just immerse themselves deeply. You just have to find somebody you trust that can dig in deep. And, those are not the same people that are going to turn people out and do all the other aspects. So, you just got to have somebody who has that strength.
Thank you. And any other table come up with a question you want to ask the speakers?
I have a comment. It's kind of a comment question and it ties to what we're talking about. So at the last BCLI session, one of the panelists or the presenters mentioned that the Metropolitan Council was having a very difficult time finding applicants who were ethnically diverse for some of these jobs. So we're talking about funding and lobbying, advocating, but there are actually jobs that are being created. Here's one, for example, in case anybody wants to look at this. The Metropolitan Council is currently hiring for a community outreach coordinator. and there may be multiple of these jobs, specifically for BRT projects, to implement strategies to engage organizations and individuals that are potentially affected by transit projects. It's a good job. It pays between $61,000 and $87,500. Now, my question to everybody here is, one, should we be lifting people up that could step into this role who we think would do a good job? And number two, do we think a ethnically diverse person would be ideal over a non-ethnically diverse person? And that's something I struggle with personally, because my wife has been in some job interviews where she was being considered. She's not ethnically diverse, but obviously I'm supporting her because I think she'd do a good job. But at the same time, I'm thinking, you're probably not the best person for this kind of outreach job. You should withdraw your name from the process. So any thoughts around that?
Well, I think that last piece is when we talk about solidarity, what's important for us to do. So I've been approached about doing work in the Latino community and outreach and engagement. Can I do it? Sure. Should I do it? No. Because there's great Latinas out there or Latinos out there that can do that work. And did I need the job? Yeah. Would it have made me money? Yeah. Was it the right thing? No, it just wasn't. And sometimes it's because of skills, sometimes it's because of solidarity and ethnicity, but making that call is the right thing to do. So I would say that, there are also times where we have to think about strategically in reality if you're going. I'm not saying this about the Met Council because I absolutely don't know this, and I think we should also try. But there are also times where we have to think about in allyship, who's the right person for the job depending on the culture of the organization. And it might be that a person of color, if they're going to go in, they need to go in eyes wide open and prepared for what they're going to experience and have a group of allies around them that are going to support them. It could be, and I've employed white males, and I've told them, because they struggle with this, right? And I've told them, we need you too. We need you to be down, not kind of down, not sort of down, but really down. So when I find them and they're down, we can do this. You're my brother. We can do this. And you're going to have opportunities to do things I will not have. And we need that. We've always needed that. Right. So I think it's important to think strategically about that. We all have a role to play, but there's I think a balance between solidarity and allyship and opportunity that has to be kind of figured out. But yeah, people should apply. We should tell people about that. We should be tweeting about it right now. Y'all should be tweeting. Because I think we need to amplify this message, and that's a great way to do that. We're getting some great coverage, but absolutely.
Really quick, what's Nexus's Twitter handle?
Right. At NexusCP and the BCLI is
Nexus
hashtag.
CP.
Yeah,
We
sorry.
can't see that good.
I'm sorry. And I had to write it very clear because my handwriting before was not very clear. So thank you. Yes, I forgot to mention about the tweeting earlier, so thank you. This table here, question?
We've got multiple.
Is it like 3-part question? Awesome. All right. Yeah.
You wrote it down, right? All right, so in the education, okay, so for the most part, looking at the work that needs to take place, seeing that we're having some issues around the area of diversity and whatnot, and inclusion, and however you want to frame it as equity, has there been any, or will there be any, or has there been any proposed participation on behalf of the council, legislatures, to look at best practices outside of the city of Minneapolis, outside of the state of Minnesota, to take a field trip, see how things are working, and try and include that as a part of their building of their education so that they can participate on a more equitable level for those that are or have not been on that page.
Well, there's so many different ways you can answer. State of Minnesota, I know when we had a conversation last year, OAP with several others, and a couple of our key legislators, sat down with, at the time, Speaker Thiessen and Majority Leader Murphy. about the issue of equity, and to really start to inform and hopefully encourage them to embed those ideas, those values into their process of when they legislate. They're learning. The state legislature is learning on one side, and on the other side, to be perfectly blunt, they don't care. Jim said it best, elections matter. Whoever's in control of that gavel and those gavels across their various committees, that's where the state's going to go. Right now, that's not going to be the leading idea. Matter of fact, it's going to be pretty much on the bottom tier for the next couple years. What we have to do is tell a better story on why equity actually could, again, enticing the current chairs and the majority, that equity is a value that should be expanded upon. And by teaching them, by showing them, that other communities across the country are doing it. Unfortunately, because this is a very clear and partisan issue, it has become a very clear and partisan issue on some effects, we won't get that much movement. What we can do is continue to educate to show how it will be in our best interest. Because if we do a better job of just equitably dispersing our resources, it actually does save money or actually increases efficiency on other levels. So at the state level, no. At the Met Council level, as you see, there's a lot of work that's being done. As you saw the Chair Helgen at the time, really lay out what they were trying to do. Equity was at the top of the conversation. And you have strong advocates, such as Gary Cunningham and now the current chair, Alec Denick and others, who are really pushing this thing. But again, because that level is appointed by the governor, their clear mandate is to push the governor's agenda, who said this is what's going on. Then you get down to the city and the county. And they're still learning, even with their field trips and all the connections and everything else. Because again, there was a series of 7-6 votes across the board at the city level that basically either stalled or made some adjustments on what some of the things that needed to be done. So it's honing in on the various levels that you're working with, and then ask what we all need to start doing on a consistent basis is asking them, what is your stance of all of our elected officials, the 201 that's over at the state legislature, the 16 Met Council, et cetera, and ask them what their stance is, and then start to educate on a consistent basis, because sometimes it may not be that moment that you get them, but if you keep hitting that drop, eventually you're going to get them when you continue to educate and build that relationship.
One other point. So a lot of people think, let's put together a policy, let's run it at the legislature, and then you run into the problems of, you got Republicans and you got Democrats, and you're fighting all that.
Yeah.
There are ways of moving policy that don't require legislation because of what the legislation already allows.
Right.
And so a lot of work that a bunch of different groups have been doing with the council itself, the Met Council, it's based on the existing statutory authority that the council already has. You don't have to go to the legislature to get anything in addition. It's already there. Now, it may not have been used very well in the past. They may have forgotten about it. It could have been covered over with years and years of practice that goes in the opposite direction. But the language is there, and you can make use of it, and it's so there can be a campaign aimed at the legislative branch, but you don't ever forget about the executive branch, particularly given the political alignment right now. You've got a governor who may or may not be interested in this stuff, but you've got commissioners that definitely are, who should be talking to the governor and ooching him along. That's a legal term of art, ooch. So, you ooch him along and get him to start making decisions in ways that support what the commissioners are after. and you don't need any legislative change at all. You know, you're confined by the four corners of what the legislation says, but you know, from my experience with the Met Council, that's pretty wide.
Yeah.
And if you get a really good chair who picks really good committee chairs at the council level, who push on the staff to start acting the way that they ought to be acting, things can start happening.
And the table in back. Did you have a good question for the panelists tonight?
Well, I always struggle with forums like this because, you know, you get these great conversations going, and then I feel like there's a touch of maybe analysis paralysis afterwards. Like, what do we do now? So, like, what do we do? What's the next step? Like, what's the one action step I can take when I look at this area?
Thank you. That was going to be we were going to ask our panelists to conclude on that point, but you already got us there. Thank you.
Segue.
Yeah. Should we dive into that?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was just going to make a plea to, you know, I think number one, we don't have enough people paying attention on the tax side of the equation, and we're talking as if we have this sort of permanent deficit, and it's false. It's always been false. We've always had the ability to have money to do things, but we have to sort of, I think, get past the intimidation on numbers in general, and I think especially on taxes. And again, you know, we're happy to nerd out with people and get you comfortable. At the state level, I was going to just invite people. There is a powerful coalition, I think, pushing for tax fairness and holding the line on that right now. It's called Invest in Minnesota, and I'm the coordinator. And you can find our website, Invest in MN, sign up there. I have stuff here. And then the Minnesota Budget Project, I think, you know, whatever you care about, we can help on technical assistance, but we already do a lot to talk about what the budget process is at the state level. So whatever your passion is, I think I can't say what that is for you, but I can tell you how it's going to have to fit into a process. And that's the biggest thing, I think, is there's a process. And somebody said the administrative power and not forgetting that. And right now, I would say, I mean, I was just holding my breath on the governor's budget because that's the first thing. Everything is set from that. So knowing the key moments where you want to get in front of, I think I see too many allies miss it. So if you don't have your thing in the governor's budget, that's a hit. You just made it really hard. And so unfortunately that's happened. The governor's budget's out and some things are in and some things are not. The next thing to pay attention, we'll know in February, end of February, is there a surplus bigger or smaller than what we thought? I think it's going to be bigger. Yeah. And that means there's more money. That means the governor can add things into his budget. That's your second chance. So hitting that point, and then if you miss those two things, legislators set their budget targets roughly after that forecast, end of February. Just make end of February your deadline. I'm sorry, I know it's coming up. But that's when you have to talk to legislators. They set their targets and their hands get tied. Certainly in March, there's some wiggle room, but you know, you can't have a good idea in April. I'm sorry. It won't get passed, very likely. Magic happens sometimes with negotiations, but it'll be behind a closed door, and you won't be able to sort of influence it. So I think knowing that timeline on whatever you care about, you can get in front of it. Not enough people are talking to the governor in the summer. Not like, you know, I sit and have coffee with him, but but we start talking to his staff early. So knowing that timeline, and again, that's the kind of stuff, if you follow our budget blog, you can, we'll explain all of that, because we know that not everyone follows all that stuff. It's probably more time than I should spend.
So I have a list of 8 things.
Just a few.
So I think one thing is remember our history. So when we changed civil rights laws, who became the law? And for me, St. Louis has brought that to mind when Anonymous outed that there were a number of law officers and officials who were KKK members. And, you know, I knew about judges really changed after the civil rights laws went into place, but I didn't think about who then became our law on the street. So you can have a success in one place in a budget, but you got to look for where those people go next to control the situation.
Yeah.
So that's my one thing for that. So watch out for where they're moving next. Second, pretty basic, keep your eyes on the prize. Watch it and be present. Know what the plans are supposed to be. Watch the budget. Don't let those things go.
Okay.
3, know where the battles are. And I think right now the battles for us that can easily be won because it's where nobody's watching or paying attention is in first, second, and third ring suburbs. We have critical mass of people in these suburbs who are not represented and are taxed. So Three Rivers Park districts tax anyone living in the first, second, and third ring suburbs, but they do not have staff and or spend resources representative of their constituents that they're taxing. No, it's easy. Nobody's challenging them on that. It could take one person showing up at a couple board meetings to make a big difference in that. That's just one example, but you could look at the city level and other things in some of those places. Also, unions. I am a union supporter. I will say it a couple more times. I am a union supporter. I am a union supporter. They're not perfect, and they are not equitable. And we need to hold them accountable because they are us. And at the Capitol. But we already talked about that. It's important. My number 4, efforts and heroes of equity are being and will be attacked. So we need to become them and we need to support them. So that's important, especially when we're dealing with budgets. That's when people really get interested in what people are talking about. It's all good to have a plan for equity, but when you start aligning resources and funding to equity, that's when people are like, there's a good plan, we got the plan, why do we need to put a number to it? So that's when the attacks come out, so be ready for that. The Met Council needs help now. They have been putting equity frameworks in place, and they are there's movements about taking away power from them because of that. So be aware of that. Watch for that. Social capital can make a difference, and we have it. A lot of times people think in our communities we don't have it, but what brought the equity framework to the place it's at for parks and trails was a social network of a mixed chick who's a 30-something, I'll be 40 in a couple weeks, so I'm owning it for a little while, from North Minneapolis who graduated from North High. It was my social network. It wasn't a social network of a wealthy person from someplace else. It was a people that were round the way kids just like me. Don't let people tell you our networks are not valuable, because they are. But broaden your network as well. My number 7 is, and this is for you, lady, where you're at in your own life. Is your home budget equitable? That's kind of deep. Sit with that one for a little bit. But in your work life, put it to work where you're at. When you practice it in your own place, then it's easier to help figure it out at a bigger scale. And then you can scale up and scale up and scale up. Right? So where you're working, where you're invested, where you go to faith, wherever you have a budget you have access to, where is that at? So go back to your work tomorrow, or your home budget, depending on what you do, whatever it is, and look at it with an equity lens. What could you do differently? What's your vendor practice? What's your consultant practice? What's your pay equity practice? What are you doing with interns? Are they paid? If they're not paid, you're not an equitable organization. Bam, I said it. Is that recorded? Yes. Please someone tweet that mess.
Too late.
Day.
They're tweeting it already.
tweet that mess.
And you cracking up over there, but I can relate to you.
I didn't tweet it.
8. All right.
Oh no, my 8th. Yes,
Yeah,
I do.
I
I
was
was
like-
thinking about it. We can make people bend to our will. Don't think you can't. It's possible. Don't get disillusioned. Don't get disillusioned. So just know it can happen.
We are close in. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add after the list of 8. Brett or Jim, any last words about what we can do? And then Jay, representing from Legal Service Aid, actually has another action step, right?
Yeah.
About something that you can do.
All
So,
So, wouldn't it be great if cities and counties had to address equity in their housing and community development plans?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great if they had to have a citizen engagement process and plan? A citizen engagement and process and plan that is designed especially to encourage participation by low and moderate income persons. Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't it be great if the jurisdiction, if the city or county was expected to take whatever actions are appropriate to encourage the participation of all of its citizens, including minorities, non-English speaking persons, as well as people with disabilities in making decisions about housing and community development? What a great idea.
Yeah. So where do we sign up?
Come see me. It's the law. It's the law that governs the expenditure of $8 million in federal money in St. Paul, $13 million in federal money in Minneapolis, and they do it on a yearly basis. They're coming up with a 5-year plan by which they're going to do it. I've got information on it here. If people want, I'll come and talk with an organization. I'll come and talk with an individual. Almost nobody uses it. The city of Minneapolis, the city of St. Paul, Hennepin County, Ramsey County, Dakota County, Coon Rapids, they're all supposed to be doing this.
Oh, okay.
State of Minnesota. So,
Awesome.
if you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to insist on these principles because they're a matter of federal law.
What's your last name, Jay?
Wilkinson, it's on the paper here.
Okay.
all right. Thank you. Any last words before we head out?
More work to be done.
Brett?
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up, because you guys got to remember the one simple thing. When you look at the flow chart of all organizations, whatever jurisdiction it is, it has the citizens of that jurisdiction at the top. So we forget that on a regular basis. And then what happens is that we don't participate in the election to actually elect our representatives. So on a daily basis, you gotta get out. This is a 365 activity. So when you do this budgeting thing, just remember that we are the collective boss. So go in with that attitude first, because too many times we believe that the Capitol and City Hall are off limits. No, you paid for it. Go ahead and go in with your friends. Just hang out, say hi. Start there. And then what you do is you start to just learn on a daily basis. You don't have to have all the answers. That's the other thing. We think we have to have all the answers walking in. They don't have all the answers, and they work there on a regular basis. So just remember that we are the reason why the government exists. Focus on that. Learn as you go, and enjoy the ride.
And you have a right to expect them to come and explain to you how these decisions are being made, and where the bodies are buried, and where the assets are hidden, and that's what citizen participation is supposed to be about. But it very, very seldom happens. I'd be happy to. I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks, but when I get back, I'll be happy to come back and talk to individuals, organizations, if folks want to take a deeper dive into that.
Oh, definitely.